Welcome back to Sportsworld. Can sport be something that heals, educates, and inspires? Can it be something that brings joy and opportunity to children who are victims of war and famine and poverty and neglect? Well, the answer is yes. Olympic speed skating legend Johan Olav Koss took that noble dream and put it into action with a charity organization he started called Right to Play. Here is his story and the story of those who benefit from his work. Johan Olav Koss, Norway's much decorated sporting hero, and the toast of the 1994 Winter Olympics in his home country. Koss dominated the speed skating events in Lillehammer, collecting 3 gold medals and setting world records in all. But to the shock of many of his fans, the tall Norwegian retired after the Lillehammer Games at age 26, saying then, as he does now, that he craved a new challenge outside of the speed skating oval. Now, Koss is the head of an international humanitarian organization called Right to Play, based out of Toronto.
I got introduced to it because of my travel to Eritrea and the African Horn, and then they've just become an independent country after the 30-year civil war with Ethiopia. And seeing the importance of sport in developing communities, and particularly post-conflict communities, was critical. And seeing how it can develop in children and youth, also for health issues, was fantastic. And for me, it broadened my perspective of what sport could do, in addition to creating Olympic champions.
Are you ready? Yes! Go!
Right to Play targets disadvantaged children who may not otherwise have an opportunity to play sport, to learn and socialize in a secure environment. The children in the program are almost always from war-torn regions or disaster zones. The sight of former child soldiers mixing with war refugees and AIDS orphans, a chilling reminder of how society has failed to protect and nurture its young.
And we've seen this example in refugee camps, we've seen in urban settings, we've seen in rural settings where it's extremely needed, where there's a lack of education, they have a lack of opportunities, they have, for instance, no mentors, or they have no teachers, or they have very little understanding of health, for instance, impact of themselves.
At school, there are so many subjects. So when they teach you about HIV, then they just teach you shortly, then they rush to other subject. But here, when they teach a subject, make sure anyone should understand it.
Okay, now this game we're going to play here is called Risky Rush.
Okay, so what we're watching is one of the Live Safe, Play Safe games. It's a game called Risky Rush. All of the children are divided up, and they will be representing different risky behaviors that could put you at risk for contracting HIV.
We are the virus. Let's hold hands. Yes. We are the virus. Right?
So what happens is the leader will call out one of these risky behaviors.
Unprotected sex.
And all of the children who are in that group will have to try and run across the field.
Right to Play is now involved in 23 countries, and it boasts a list of volunteer names that includes some of the highest profile people in the world of sport. In Ethiopia, a recent trip by Right to Play included Canadian Olympic sports heroine Clara Hughes, who's been a medalist in both the Winter and Summer Olympics.
Clara Hughes.
The time that you give is nothing compared to the inspiration and the motivation that you get back from seeing these kids and knowing that you're helping make the world a better place. It's incredible.
In areas we see that girls and women are not particularly allowed to play or to participate, like Clara Hughes going to the field, showcasing like a woman can become an Olympic champion, you can be an athlete, both in summer and winter sport, and be able to use that as an inspiration for the girls.
I think for myself, the most inspirational and emotional element of the trip came when we visited the Center for the Mentally Handicapped Children, mentally disabled. and we participated in a game with them and saw the pure joy and delight and happiness that they took in this game of handball that we played with them. How skilled they were, how much fun they were having. It was really a profound moment for me.
As for what's ahead in the immediate future, Koss says 2007 will see a continuation of his group's efforts in Africa, but also a focus on other parts of the world.
We have had a very good start in the Middle East, and we want to expand. We have started a lot of infrastructure and support training in the occupied Palestinian territories. We have expanded to Lebanon, and we're starting up in Jordan, and we will also look at other Middle Eastern countries over the next 2 years to expand our programs.
Koss's sincere hope is that someday there will be less need for groups like his, and that children everywhere will have opportunity for play. Like many humanitarians, he wants community leaders and parents everywhere to embrace the role of sport and the difference it can make. All this to try to ensure that the next generation learns from the mistakes of the current one and chooses basketballs over bullets and footballs over fighting. To finish up our program, we look at the ancient wrestling tradition of Nuba in central Sudan. Locals claim the sport dates back 2,500 years, and they fiercely dispute the generally accepted claims that the ancient Greeks invented wrestling. Al Jazeera's Joanna Gasharowska traveled to Sudan and sent this report.
Wrestling, one of the oldest sports in the world. The Greeks claim to have invented it, but here in Sudan, what could be a more ancient version is making its comeback. This is Nuba wrestling. Badr al-Din was 13 when he began wrestling for honour in South Kordofan. Now in his 30s, he's one of around 2 million Nuba living in the Sudanese capital, Khartoum. For him, the sport is vital in keeping his culture alive.
Well, this is our tradition and our customs. I love this wrestling Nuba.
The Nuba are one of the largest non-Arab groups in northern Sudan. Many fled to Khartoum during the 21-year civil war when they were caught in the fighting between the north and the south. That war has now ended, and as their children grow up and forget the horrors of the conflict, wrestling is one way of reminding them of their ancient roots.
Wrestling is not simply a sport. It's a matter of the whole community. Wrestling has its own seasons, its own preparations, its own ornaments, its own ceremonies.
Every Friday in the Al-Hajj Yusuf district just outside Khartoum, the Nuba organise wrestling tournaments. The makeshift arena can hold around 5,000 spectators. The rules are simple. A wrestler can use both hands and feet to grapple with his opponent. The first to be thrown out of the ring or onto his back is the loser. In the past, fights could last for hours or days. There are even old Nuba tales of some taking weeks. Now each bout lasts just 4 minutes. Nuba wrestling has adapted itself to Islamic law in northern Sudan. The fighters are no longer naked, but essentially it's the same as it's been for centuries, something the people are very proud of.
The Greeks and Romans are usually credited as the fathers of wrestling, but in this part of the world it's believed the sport we're more used to seeing on TV actually originated with the Nuba.
It was original here, people are here, and then as a type of culture, it passed over to the Mediterranean. They enjoyed, they started practicing. The same thing happened to the football. Football came to Sudan with the Europeans. We start practicing it. Now we have clubs, we have whatever. It is not our culture, it is not a unique culture of Sudanese.
But can such an ancient game have a future in Sudan, a country where funding for sport is limited? These days, the wrestlers can win a small amount of money, but it's not enough for them to live on. Organisers have the odds stacked against them.
No any funds, no aid, no any support from the government. Just we do it by ourselves. But they're supposed to give us money because this, it's a traditional sport. We hope we will build a stadium because we like that, and this is our tradition. So we have, to preserve it, or we have to keep it.
As Nuba, I will fight and fight and fight and fight and fight because this is my culture. I enjoy it. I feel it in every drop of blood.
For the Nuba, wrestling was always more than just a sport. Villagers made leaders out of their wrestling heroes, and communities settled disputes in the ring. It was a way of keeping peace. Now they say it's not just their children who can learn from it, but the rest of Sudan too. Joanna Gajarowska, Al Jazeera, Khartoum.
That's all the time we have for this edition of Sports World. As ever, you can keep up to date with all the sports news on our website, aljazeera.net/English. I'm Brendan Connor. Thanks for joining us. You're watching Al Jazeera.